they didn't disappear. At least, not both of them. One went quiet after deciding. The other went quiet to escape deciding. And you treated those silences as equal. That's where the misread started. Silence is not neutral. It never was. When someone stops speaking, something has already shifted internally. But with INTJ and INTP, the same external silence comes from completely different internal mechanics. And if you don't see the difference, you respond wrong. Every time. Let's start with the INTJ. When an INTJ goes silent, it is not confusion, it is not hesitation, it is not emotional withdrawal, it is compression. Information has already been gathered, patterns have already been ranked, outcomes have already been simulated. The silence comes after clarity. The INTJ retreats because interaction becomes inefficient. Noise becomes interference. People become variables that might distort execution, so the INTJ closes the channel. Not to think, but to finalize. INTJ silence is narrow, focused, directional. It reduces the world until only the relevant elements remain. The decision is not forming, it is locking. And while you're waiting for a response, the plan is already stabilizing without you. Now here's where people get confused. From the outside, INTJ silence looks cold, detached, unreachable. But internally, it's structured. The mind is not drifting, it is converging. Every second of silence is removing options, not exploring them. So when you interrupt an INTJ mid-silence, you're not helping them think. You're injecting noise into a system that was already resolved. That's why INTJs don't react emotionally in those moments. They react strategically, because what you interrupted was not uncertainty, it was control. Now switch. Same silence, different logic. The INTP. When an INTP goes silent, nothing has finalized, nothing has compressed. In fact, the system is overloaded. INTP silence is not convergence, it is dispersion. Thoughts aren't narrowing, they're fracturing. Connections branch, possibilities multiply. Internal input stacks without hierarchy. And eventually, the system pulls the plug. INTPs don't retreat because they know. They retreat because they don't want to feel what the unfiltered cognition is doing to them. The silence is a buffer, a firewall. It's not about making a decision. It's about suspending contact with stimulation that has become unbearable. So while the INTJ is eliminating variables, the INTP is trying to survive them. Externally, both stop talking. Internally, one is closing doors. The other is staring at too many doors at once. This is the invisible pattern. You see silence, you assume thought. But silence does not always mean thinking. Sometimes it means disconnecting. INTJ silence has weight. INTP silence has diffusion. INTJ silence has intent. INTP silence has relief. INTJ silence says, "Do not interfere." INTP silence says, "I cannot process more input right now." And this is where people fail them both. They respond to silence with the same strategy. They wait, they pressure, they fill the gap, they demand clarity. When you pressure an INTJ in silence, you weaken trust. because you just demonstrated that you don't recognize when a process is already closed. You revealed yourself as a disturbance. When you pressure an INTP in silence, you overload them further, because you forced re-entry before the internal system stabilized. You didn't bring clarity, you created fragmentation. Same behavior, opposite damage. INTJ withdrawal is intentional isolation. INTP withdrawal is protective dissociation. INTJ steps back to maintain trajectory. INTP steps back to reduce internal pain. And here's the part that's hardest to accept. The INTJ often looks more emotionally absent, but is actually more present internally. The INTP often looks calm, but is internally flooded. Your eyes lie to you here. That's why misreads happen. You think the INTJ is avoiding, they're executing. You think the INTP is planning, they're buffering. Silence, in this context, is not a personality quirk. It's a signal, but only if you know what you're looking at. INTJ silence is a closed system. Once it starts, input is no longer welcome. INTP silence is an open system temporarily offline. Input isn't rejected, it's postponed. So when the INTJ returns from silence, they return with direction. When the INTP returns from silence, they return with partial clarity and unresolved branches. That difference alone changes how conflict, collaboration, and timing should work. But most people never adjust. They keep reacting as if silence meant the same thing. And this is where relationships fail. Teams fracture. Trust erodes. Not because of silence itself, but because of the logic behind it. The silence was never the problem. Your interpretation was. They didn't go quiet for the same reason. They never did. One of them was finishing something. The other was trying to stop something. And you responded as if silence was just silence. That's where the shift happened. Quietly, without conflict, without warning. The silence wasn't empty. It was active. It was doing work you didn't recognize. So when you reacted, you weren't responding to the moment. You were responding after it. And the question isn't whether you misunderstood the silence. It's how many times you've already done it, without noticing. And now, you're not early anymore.